Welcome everyone to the Guide to Growth During High Inflation and Supply Chain Disruptions. We are certainly experiencing that in the pool industry, no question about that. My name is Michelle Kavanaugh. I actually am the social media and event planner for Watershape University, so I'm very excited to be here today. Lauren and Dave and all of them are actually teaching courses in Wilmington, North Carolina, starting tomorrow. So we're excited about all those design courses out there. So again, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. We know you're very busy and we really appreciate you coming and being here with us today. You can move on to the next slide if you like, Jeff. We would like to certainly say thank you to our corporate engagement team. Without this group of individuals and these companies, we would not be able to do what we do, including providing free education. There's a lot of free education out on the Watershape University website. Go to watershape.org. And you can actually log into the portal there. And there's all the webinars we've done up to this point are out there for free for you to view at any time you want. So feel free to go out there anytime and check those out. And you can go to the next slide, Jeff, with our media team here. We certainly would like to point out Ask the Masters. They're heavily involved in Watershape University, and we will also be promoting this webinar out on the YouTube channel for Watershape, for ATM, excuse me, Ask the Masters. They do have a podcast. If you have not listened to that, you should. And you can go to Ask the Masters on YouTube and look at all those past podcasts that are out there. And we're going to put this one up there as well. We certainly want you to be able to ask questions during this, and we'll talk about that because that, Jeff really likes to have the engagement. You can move on to the next slide, Jeff, if you like. But Jeff really wants to have the engagement while we do this. We have just a couple of codes of contact here. Nothing significant, but really try not to screenshot the information. This is Jeff's proprietary information, and there's going to be information at the end on how you can actually contact Jeff if you'd like to ask more questions or get the handout, because there will be a handout that he's providing as part of this webinar. It will be on the website, and we'll share that with you at the end. So not sharing those, again, the content and the handouts and things with others would be great. And then if you, like I said, if you ask questions during this, it's really a way for us to engage with you and for Jeff to really, answer specific questions about your company or what you're experiencing. He would certainly love to do that. So feel free to put questions in the chat box or the question box, and I will be monitoring those during the podcast, or the podcast. It is kind of a podcast, right? I will be monitoring those, and then I will ask those as they come up so that Jeff can answer the questions while we're on the topic. And we love that. And you can go to the next slide, Jeff, and I'll let you go on. So Jeff, just so you know who Jeff is, he's actually a colleague of mine, but he has worked, collaborated with companies from, wood mills to space flight. And he has worked with teams of as small as 2 all the way up to 65,000. And interestingly enough, what he'll share is that the differences between those different teams and those different companies is pretty small. And he's going to talk about that in today's presentation. So with all of his experience in this topic, and he specializes in this topic, including supply chain issues and challenges and this high inflation stuff that we're going through right now. So he's going to use all that experience and all of those lessons. He's going to put some ideas or tactics or best practices in your head today. And hopefully you can walk away with that and that you can actually utilize that in your business in the very, very near future. So please help me welcome Jeff Wolfe.
Michelle, thank you so much. Thank you, Watershape University, for the opportunity to be part of the Wolfpack. I love that. That is so fun. And as you're participating today, and I do mean participating, we're going to make this more of a podcast feel. This is not intended to be a straight lecture. I've got some information to share. We want to keep it crisp and brief. So we're going to be talking about a lot of things in about a 45-minute time frame. And we'll dive right in. I went through these slides earlier today and just cut all the fluff out so we can dive right in. And please ask questions in the chat. Again, this is meant to be interactive. One of the ground rules is participation equals value, right? The more you participate, the more value you will get out of the conversation that we're having today, because this is really intended to be interactive, right? Training is about finding ways to get new skills, something you can apply. It's a behavior change is the intention of the outcome from any kind of training event, as opposed to education, which is to gain more knowledge. So today, my goal for you is to find at least one thing that you can take away and apply in your business. And that would be the behavior change outcome that helps you move forward towards your goals and to get through the chaos that we've all experienced over the last 2 years and that's continuing to surround us. So are you in? Here's what I want to know. This is the participation part. Okay. Are you in? If you're in, put a yes in the chat box. There we go. Thank you, MK. Yeah, here we go. MABB. So I'm seeing Bob Bowley. Thank you. Omar. Thank you. Terrence. Okay, here we go. We've got people in. Barb, Douglas, Matt. Thank you so much. Michelle, she's in with us. So here we go. Let's dive in. Here's the thing. Business has been booming, right? In the pool industry. There's a lot of industries that just got absolutely crushed, beginning with the great lockdown, because everybody's been home. There's been a big, there's been a big push to increase, improve, make that a better lifestyle while they're home. So that's been a lot of growth. There's a challenge with that, right? It crushes your profits right now because you have costs going up. Inflation has just been rip roaring this last 18 months, especially the last 6 months. Your customers are likely getting angry because all the supply chain disruptions have made it hard to be consistent with materials coming in. We'll talk about that a little bit, but also you're likely very frustrated with finding talent. The people you need, you get a job, then you have to, when you finally get the materials, can you get the people in order to be able to build the pool, do all of the work that needs to be done to do what you promised to do for the customer? So here's what I want to know. What have you been frustrated with the most there? A, B, or C? Has it been getting your profit squeezed by inflation, by price increases, having to deal with customers because you're on hold on your schedule because you can't get some parts that are supposed to be coming in that aren't, they're stuck in the harbor somewhere or on a ship somewhere, or who knows. Whoop, let me back up. I'm getting too excited and jumping ahead. Or is it really about being able to find the talent, the people that you need, the workforce that you need? Drop an A, B, or C, all of the above, or if you've got something else, drop that in the chat box. Again, this is part of the interactive portion. We want to keep the ABC, right? Yeah, Nathan, thank you. Totally understand. We're getting crushed. A and B, Barb, thank you. Who else? Get one more. Oh, yes, thank you. Omar, Douglas, ABC. So it's kind of across the board, right? And as a business owner, as a business leader, it puts you right squarely in the middle. So here's something I want to get out on the table right now. The elephant in the room. Look, there's no magic wand, right? This is the situation that we find ourselves in. This is going to continue for a while. We're going to have more supply chain disruptions coming down the pipe. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. Inflation is not going away, but there's a solution. You have control over how you respond to that. And the military has a saying, if I may, it's not it is embrace the bad. They use a different word, but just embrace the challenge. And the military uses a different word for it. It's just it's not something that's a great situation, but it's where we are. How we respond to it, how you respond to it, will make all the difference in the world. And unfortunately, there's no guarantees. So I'm not going to stand here today and say, hey, I've got the solution for you. We've got at least 3 major forces coming together at one time that are causing you headaches. There's not a solution to that, but there are ways to succeed in it. So let's talk about supply chain first. This is a photo that I actually took on the water off the coast of Long Beach when there were, I believe at that time, there were 168 ships, unprecedented, never heard of before, waiting to get into the ports to unload. And there were a bunch of problems that were causing that. It wasn't that the longshoremen weren't working. Yeah, could they work some more hours? Sure. But the problem was there weren't enough berths to bring the ships in. When the ships came in, part of the crews were out because they were sick with COVID. But even if they were in, they couldn't run all the cranes to unload the ships because there was no place to put the containers because they couldn't get enough trucks to move the containers. They didn't have enough train space to get the containers out of the port. So it's just one thing after another. There were multiple things that were happening. Containers started to become short supply. That's kind of the situation that you see yourself in, likely, with getting parts. But the thing is, this is going to continue. Chlorine has been a challenge. So talking specifically about the pool industry, there's been chlorine shortages, which you build a pool for a customer, but they can't really enjoy it because they don't have the chlorine to keep the water clean and enjoy the pool. That's going to be alleviated. There's industry projections are saying, that, there's more capacity coming back online after one of the major plants was put out of commission. That's not going to really hit the market though until like late summer, early fall. So it's going to be built late in the season. So there's things that are happening. They're just not happening fast enough. Plus, China has been locking down port cities. Shanghai is completely closed. They're ordering people to stay indoors. They're talking about closing down Beijing. So they're shutting down ports and major manufacturing hubs, which is going to disrupt supply lines again. We're waiting to see how that plays out. But okay, so chlorine's largely made in the United States. That's good. We've got more control over that. By 2024, China is going to be a major player in the chlorine market. So that puts another variable in place. Something else to consider, is with that being said, alternatives like saltwater pools have been rising. So that's something to continue to look at. Do you have the ability? How does that affect you? How does it affect your relationships with your clients? How you guide your clients when you're designing pools and spa spaces for them? We're looking at the photos of some of the design work, some of the living spaces that were created for clients, courtesy of Watershape University, before this webinar started. And I'll tell you what, it's just amazing to see those kind of spaces created. If you can't get a water pump, that creates a problem. So you need to look at supply chain. For a long time, supply chain analysis, supply chain concerns were just something that big corporations worried about. Now it's affecting all of us because we don't know if we're going to be able to get a piece of software. A computer breaks, you can't get a replacement for it. I had a problem with a laptop, and it was like, yeah, guess what? You can send it to a depot. It's like, well, when can I get a replacement? Well, it's like 90 days. And I'm going, oh, shoot, it didn't have my backup computer. So I pulled an old computer out that I had kept just in case of emergency and limped along with that. We have those types of disruptions that are affecting us. So we need to look at step by step, from our supplier to their supplier. Where are they buying their parts? Do you have the kind of relationships with them where you can ask those kind of questions to look at where does stuff come from so that you can get some visibility on, hey, you know what, if 90 days from now, we're going to have a supply problem because such and such manufacturing regions closed in China or in some other country. It's not just China. China's been on the radar and in the news a lot. Just using them as an example, if they're closing a port, 90 days later, can't get something because it either can't be made because the factories are closed or it can't be shipped because the port's closed. Can you see that coming in order to create an alternative? And where might that hit? Beware of being blindsided because of something that is embedded, a part that's embedded in a supplier's piece of equipment that you need in order to execute on what your commitments to your customers, to your clients. Any questions about that?
I was going to ask a question, Jeff, about that.
Yeah.
So are you recommending that these the pool industry folks, that they go out and connect with their distributors or their manufacturers reps and find out if they are going to have supply issues coming up? They probably are doing that. I don't know, but hopefully they'll be honest. But Pool Corp is obviously one of the big distribution hubs where most people buy stuff. And that would be where they go, but maybe their manufacturer's rep for the area for whatever equipment they're purchasing. Is that your recommendation?
Yes, absolutely. Talk with them, see what they say, and they may not know at times, but find out. If they do know, I'm sure because it's meant to be a friendly conversation. It's not not what are you selling me. Ask them, say, hey, where's this coming from? Communication, and this is something to touch on before we wrap up. Communication is a massive issue. Being able to talk to manufacturers reps, checking the box on stuff that you've bought in the past. Does it have a made in sticker on it?
Oh, that's a good idea.
That it's something that's coming. Look at what you've bought in the past. Talk to your manufacturers reps, to distributors, and see, where do things come from? They have a vested interest in paying attention to that too, because they don't want to stock out. That hurts their business. So it's one of those things where you're both in the same boat, so to speak, because of so many things shipping in from different parts of the globe, even for stuff that's manufactured here in the United States. I mean, since the 1980s, there's been more Japanese parts in General Motors cars than there have in Toyota Accords that are assembled in Ohio. Even though we consider a Toyota a foreign car and a Chevrolet a American car.
Yeah.
So there's this mix match of a lot of things that isn't really apparent unless you're digging into it for some reason. And now with what has happened from the Great Lockdown forward, it's this type of supply chain analysis that we would do. Let me step back from that for a second. I built aircraft design and build aircraft in one stage of my career. That's a 3.5 year long supply line to get from the metal that's needed to make the landing gear supports, for example. And it's a specialty metal because it bears so much weight. There's a lot that goes into that in order to get it into the factory just to start assembling the aircraft. If you've got something the size of a DC-10, so we're talking commercial aircraft, military aircraft, we had to do incredibly intense supply chain analysis because of the safety factors involved with putting something as big as a DC-10 in the air. We're from McDonnell Douglas, as big as a DC-10 in the air with a couple hundred people on it. Now, because of the problems we've experienced over the last 2 years, it behooves us, the best practice is now to look into, as leaders in our businesses, as a leader in your business, to look into where are the things that you need to make your business run coming from. It could be a piece of software. It could be a computer. We bought Dell computers. Didn't realize that they were being made in China. It's going, Dell, it's an American company, and I should know better, right? So this is telling on myself. This is something, because of the industries that I've worked in over the years, I should know better. Caught blind, flat-footed on a delivery cycle because had to wait for something to be shipped from China.
Yeah.
Because that was where Dell had outsourced it to. Wasn't something that was critical, didn't bring the business to a halt, but it could have if the timing had been different. Fortunately, it worked out fine, but we had to bootstrap it, and it increased my frustration. I was like, oh man, I can't believe it. So started to look at things closer. When you look at what you're buying through your distributors, where is that stuff really made? Have you, and as you're watching this, as you're participating, if you've looked into some of this stuff, drop in the chat box. Where are some of the places that you've seen stuff made that may surprise you? And it's not just the final. The thing that comes to mind for me is like a water pump for pool. The assembly may come from the US or Mexico or Canada or someplace close where we're not as concerned about the supply line, but the parts within it, there may be 1, 2, or 3 parts that were made somewhere else. Batteries, with the rise of electric vehicles and whatnot, batteries have become a major issue because of where the materials are mined that go into the batteries, and then where it's processed after that. A lot of the parts come from parts of the world that have just been absolutely closed down over the last 2 years. Again, it takes us back to China for some of the precious metals and some of the pieces that go into making an automotive battery, just as an example. So this is it. Talk to distributors, but the reason I use this graphic on the displays, map it out, take a look, so you get some visual and written, to be able to get the larger picture of where stuff coming from, what's really going to cause you a problem in your business. In addition to talking to the people that you buy from, what if you can't get it, what is going to bring your business to a halt, and how much risk is there? This is the kind of analysis that we did on big products, like when coming back to commercial aircraft, where we look at it and going, well, if we can't get this for maintenance, usually one of the things we'd be concerned about is maintenance for many years out, then what's the alternative? How do we take care of that? And that gives you the opportunity to then, before something becomes a crisis, to have an idea of, okay, if this happens, then we'll go to this alternative. If chlorine, if a year and a half from now, chlorine once again becomes a problem, we can shift real easily to guiding customers to using to go into a saltwater pool instead of a chlorinated water pool. So does that answer your question?
It sure did. Thank you.
Okay. Moving along, and I'm watching the time to make sure we stay on track. Don't want to. So this feeds into the next chart, which is what we're talking about is play chess. Your role in your company is shifting. It's shifting from a leadership perspective because of the great lockdown, the supply chain disruptions that have happened. It's shifting because of the growth that is being, that you're taking advantage of in the industry. Orders are up. Here, people have, some companies have books of businesses that go a year, 2 years out. That's great. Company grows. Your role changes as the company grows. Who, are you developing a leadership team in your company? Hold that thought. I want to come back to the idea of playing chess. With playing chess, excuse me, Getting all excited about this. The thing to consider in chess, what happens? The grandmasters of chess detach from the game. They step back and look at the entire board. So there's some detachment. In the heat of the day, when you're struggling to make payroll, it's hard to emotionally detach and step back. When you've got not just one, but a couple of big customers that are screaming because something's behind schedule because of a supply chain delay, or because you can't get the work team that you need to go do the job, that makes it hard to step back and detach. It's a crucial skill, a crucial ability to hone, though, as the leader of your business, to be able to get that detachment, to step back and look at the entire playing board, the entire board, like a chess master does. Look at the entire situation and say, here's the steps we need to take right at the moment that are gonna be most helpful, and then back into it. Does that make sense? Are you still with me? If you're still with me, drop in the chat and see have you experienced that? Have you had that struggle? So Nathan, thank you. Okay, Barb, yep. Michelle, thank you. So it ties into also, how do you move ahead? Because there's a lot that's going to happen. You've got things coming up like inflation is already squeezing your profits and causing problems. That's going to be with us for 3 to 5 years. One of the business experts, Ram Charan, who helped General Electric get through the crazy inflation and high interest rates of the 1970s and early 1980s, he's predicting as long as 5 years. Federal Reserve has been saying as long as 3 years. You need to dig into some of the reports to find that, because they don't want to upset the public, the consumer side of the markets. Supply chain disruptions are going to go on until at least through 2023, because if we look at nothing else at China, they're shut down right now. That's going to have a 6 to 9 month impact in the short term. So we know that's going to carry over into 2023. So it's being that ability to detach and step back is going to be very useful to maintain perspective and to step into leadership role. There's younger generations in the workforce now, 30, depending on which industry you're in, as much as 35% to over half of your workforce are millennials. Millennials have gotten a lot of negative press. Some of it deserved, some of it not. I have worked with some incredible millennial generation leaders. One in particular that I did an interview. We do a podcast. Also did an interview a few years ago, and it's amazing because you have one that is just an unbelievably powerful, successful entrepreneur. Her younger brother is the typical slacker, hiding out, hanging out at the parents' folks, going, what do I need a job for? I got, I'm doing fine here, kind of a scenario. So it has me thinking about my generation. So I'm a boomer, almost generation X. So I'm a late stage boomer generation, if you will. And I got thinking about that and going, you know what? If I think about the people I grew up with, I've got several examples of both of those. And I've caught myself fighting those kinds of, that kind of, getting into the entrepreneurial lifestyle was something that was a push for me at first. I'm a recovering engineer and I love it now, but at first it's like, wow, it wasn't what I thought it was about. So the millennial generation, they are requiring a shift in leadership because they expect different things. Fortunately, a lot of what they expect tracks with what is true for high performance teams. Now, one of the things I wanted to touch on before we leave this lead slide, it's here we have a picture of a military leader. It's like, what kind of a leader are you? What environment, what culture do you create at your company that would attract people to to come and work for you? One of the things to consider also as a leader, especially in chaotic times like we're in right now, is what Jim Collins called the Stockdale paradox in his book, Good to Great. The Stockdale paradox being something he'd learned from Admiral Stockdale, who was telling the story of when he was a POW in Vietnam. And he talked about, it was the optimists that didn't last. The ones that are going, hey, we're going home for New Year's. We're going home by Easter. We're going home by Memorial Day. It was this disconnected, ignoring the reality of their situation, environment, perspective that did not help them survive the experience. The thing that did get them through the experience was the leadership that Stockdale provided based on what he observed, which was the people that had the acceptance of the grim reality, his phrase, grim reality of the situation they were in, with determination that they were going to get through it. It's like, so that's the Stockdale paradox. Here's paradox. I'm sorry. Here's the reality that we find ourselves in, but you know what? We will get through it. Here's what we know about that. Even though we don't know how long it's going to take, the path isn't necessarily clear. We will get through it, but it's still rooted in the understanding the reality of the situation, acknowledging it, and communicating it first. That comes back to communicating with with suppliers, with the distributors. That ties into communicating with your customers as well. And when something doesn't arrive in time and it's going to delay the schedule again, that's a hard conversation. Having hard conversations is a key leadership skill. Which begs the question, and this is jumping ahead, how are you honing your skills on things like that? How are you getting better at leading, at delegating? Who are your advisors? The people that associate with Watershape University, that's a great team from the instructional side. Watershape University brings a lot to the table, but also the other students, the other people that are in the educational programs, spending time with them helps with perspective and finding a lot. Yes, Michelle, advisors are very important. What is your mission? What is your mission with your company? Why did you start doing what you're doing? For me, I'm a recovering engineer because I started out my career as an engineer because they were hiring. I was good at math. I could get into an engineering program. I found out if I went to school year round, I could graduate in 3 years instead of 4. Then there were jobs on the other side. I grew up in the Midwest and that was the early 1980s when I graduated from high school. I'm not going to give the exact date. It was so long ago, it's painful to talk about. But the point is, I was looking for a job. I wasn't thinking so much about what do I want to accomplish. Maybe that's how you started out. But now, as things, as you are adjusting, then you need to take a look at, okay, what are we doing? What is the company about? Why are you doing it personally? And what is it that your company is doing in terms of serving your clients, serving the community, the market niche that you serve? This is important for a couple of reasons. It's important for marketing messaging, so that your prospective clients know why you are the company to pick. What makes you any better, any different from any other company that competes in your space? Building pools, designing outdoor living environments. For particularly for millennials, but for the people that you're bringing onto your team in general, the high performers look for this. Why should they be part of your team? What is it that you're doing that makes coming to work for you more than just a paycheck? That does two things. That attracts people who are going to be hard to recruit away from you because they're going, no, they're part of, and millennials look for that. They want to be a part of something bigger, something, something, they want to understand the meaning of what they're doing. They want to be coached and trained. So they want to have development going on. But if you don't understand your mission, you can't articulate that. The adventure begins for you because there's a lot of personal development that goes on in this. You need to delegate more. You need to be, your skill as your company grows, your skill with getting things done through other people, not doing it, but coaching them on making it happen, making sure it gets done, rather than being the one that does it. To not be the technical expert, not give the answers. Even if you know the answers, you need to let your team be the team, right? You need to let them, you guide them and coach them. Is that making sense? You seeing any value in this? This is part of the participation. So drop something in the comments here. We'll keep rolling while we're doing this. I know we're moving fast. Part of it is enjoy the journey too. It's a grind. It can feel lonely. There's a lot, there's all the pressure. You're working on making payroll, keeping the customers happy, trying to find people to get out on the job site, dealing with distributors and manufacturers reps and looking, what's coming up, family issues, working with kids, helping them maintaining time and mental space and positive attitude for the people that are important in your life. So enjoying. I picked this particular slide because motorcycle riding is big for me. If I get an hour of wind therapy, as I like to call it, completely changes my attitude, resets my perspective. So make sure that you have time to enjoy the journey. You need to bake that into your schedule, just like you do sales meetings, just like you do time with your accountant. So that remember, recreation is about is to recreate mindset. It helps to break open creativity. And what is it worth if we're not enjoying the journey? Right? There are times where you just have to be way out of balance on getting stuff done. So finding more employees, if you're not enjoying the journey, who are you going to attract into your business? For one thing, finding more employees is a huge problem. All industries, hearing from the pool in spa industry that even finding the non-skilled labor that's necessary for doing some of the work on the job sites is a problem. And we're seeing that in other industries as well. Here's a question I have for you. This is a challenge question. Where are you looking that you haven't looked? What are you looking at what other industries are doing? Like, for example, in automotive industry, in warehousing, Terrence, recommendations for handling always tricky communications with client. It comes to mind. Yes. Construction. When it comes to mind, construction prices increase. Let me come back to that. That's a long question. Let me finish this thought and we'll come back to that. So in Manpower, temp agency serves manufacturing, warehousing, and some of the automotive industry. So they're great at bringing skilled, but sometimes not skilled labor to the table. Are there temp services that serve other industries that might be something, an organization that can help you? Have you thought about interns? As crazy as that is, looking at temp agencies, have you thought about interns? Now, this may not be a viable avenue, but think it through for a second first. What's different about interns? Here, you've got people that are willing to work part-time for low wage, or in some cases, internships are free because they want to learn. They need stuff on their resume to show they've got some job experience, either high school. I mean, I started working part-time when I was a sophomore in high school, kept that up through graduating in college. While culturally things have changed over the last 40 years, I'll just say that out loud. There's still young adults that are looking for work opportunities. And here's something that stunned me. Jason Forrest, who runs a training and development company, was telling a story of, and he specializes in working with millennials. He was telling a story of a millennial generation intern that canceled her vacation with her family, cut it short so she could fly on her own dime back to his company to work for free. She'd been an intern the previous summer to work for free at his annual event. How would you like to have people on your team that want that much to be part of your team? And that was because her quote was, "This was the only company I ever worked for that gave me meaningful work on day one." Or in other words, providing people something to do. So think about this. Is there an opportunity to have interns come in and do some of the less appealing work? I mean, my first job was mixing soil for a horticulturist with a coal shovel. It's like 2 tons of soil. They had to have the right mix. Do that, but also learn other aspects of the business so that you're helping them develop. You're showing why is that aligned with what they want to do, so that you're not just bringing hands in. Sometimes with scheduling and whatnot, you just need the hands, but it's about thinking outside the box, looking at what are other people doing and developing a team that because they're doing something, they're not just doing make tasks, make work tasks. I'm going to come back to this for a second. I want to deal with Terrence's question here. Or Terrence, thank you for the question. So recommendations for handling always tricky communication with the client when it comes to mid-construction prices increases. That's always a tough conversation. Absolutely. Have the economic price increase clause in our contract, but having to exercise is now tough. Yes. They'll forget all about that, right? When it gets to that moment to go, you know what, we need to increase the cost because of this. They don't remember ever having covered that. It's the first time they've ever heard of it. They'll never remember having heard of that clause. Now, in fairness, that's human psychology. We tend to remember what it is that we like best. And that's a clause that we don't want to be talking about in our contracts. That's so you handle that up front. here, it's the skill of handling tough conversations and bringing it to them, in a direct way, certainly putting the best foot forward. But again, have you been honing your skill at handling tough conversations as a leadership development activity? And there's, there are approaches. I don't have time to do complete coaching on that right now, but there's ways to approach that make it more effective to have that conversation, even though it's still going to be uncomfortable for both. The key is be very, very clear with them that the relationship with them as a customer is more important than anything else. They're in the same reality that you're in. Prices are rising and squeezing everybody. But focus on relationship first. Present the conversation as, not exercising a clause in the contract. That's where we don't want to end up, right? We don't want to end up having a legal conversation about contracts. It's in the relationship though. It's in the pre-work that leads up to it, having the clause there so you can have that conversation as part of the sales process, but also throughout the working relationship to have aggressive communication up to that point. So then if you do have to have a tough conversation, they always come up from one thing or another: rising prices, something's delayed, something didn't install, it doesn't look exactly in the drawing as it does in the execution. So you need to hone that skill, focus on the relationship in order to be able to have a better conversation, better outcome with them when something unpleasant like price increases that forces an increase in. One thing that we did with a manufacturing company that I worked with on their pricing policy, we worked in pricing that in advance, pricing it in advance to the best of our abilities so that we wouldn't have to have those conversations. So there's enough margin that unless something really crazy happened, we would not have to go back and ask for more because of a price increase on our side. Value, this is the second thing, and I'll leave you with this. In those kind of conversations, the thing in the customer's mind is always about the value. If the price is increasing to you and you need to pass it along, well, what value does that give them? And they have a slide on value pricing coming up, but the issue there is it's got to be about their what is it that they value, otherwise they're going to balk at it. So another question here that I want to challenge you with is why, and I hope that helps, Terrence, and we can talk about that.
What is your recommendation for honing your skills? Is it working with coaches? Is it other courses?
Yes, working with coaches, I'm sorry, Michelle, didn't mean to.
Oh, that's good.
Working with coaches, there are explicit communications training programs that focus on that, negotiation training. There was I'm trying to think of,
I do like what you said though. So focusing on the customer and your relationship with them and the value that you're bringing to the table, and coming at it from that perspective versus just talking about the fact that it's a clause in the contract is what you're saying. The clause in the contract conversation is like, down the road if it becomes an issue.
Yes, because one thing, so with professional services, for example, a strategy that I learned and has worked well personally and also for companies I've worked with is always scheduling a progress review before presenting an invoice. So it makes sure before handing the client an invoice, they get an opportunity to be reminded of how great things are going and the great progress that's been made, what the value has been to them up to that point. If they've got an issue that may not have been voiced before that, there's an opportunity to get that on the table before asking them to make a payment. So it gets handled before giving them the invoice. That has prevented a lot of uncomfortable conversations. And again, aggressive, and on the relationship building side, aggressive communication, frequent. Let me be careful with the word aggressive. Frequent communication with customers is crucial in chaotic times, because the strength of your relationship with the customers will determine the strength of cash flow you get from them. So that would be, Nathan, baptism by fire. Yes. Welcome to leadership. Part of it is that you can avail yourself of all the tools, training, coaching, and everything else. It's having as one of my mentors put it, it's getting the at-bats, right? It's that trial by fire. It's like being put in that situation the better prepared you are, the better the outcome will be. No matter how prepared you are, you're still going to learn stuff. There's still going to be times that things went wrong. There's still going to be presentations. Like I did a sales presentation to a group of 40, 50 business owners. We were doing a multi-hour, it was a sales presentation, but it was a informational. We're going, look, here, it gives us a chance to showcase what we can do. And then we talked to them about doing more afterwards. But the whole point was we got a couple hours with them. We're going to deliver value. I'm co-presenting with a colleague. We switch presenters. My colleague goes off to the men's room with his mic hot. We're using wireless mics. Trial by fire. Yeah, we live and learn, right? But that is an excellent comment, Nathan. Trial by fire. So why you? What do you need to know to get top results? What do you need to know? Why are you in terms of who should work for you? Let me see what I just did. So you need to develop your employees as well. So one problem is getting new employees in the door. Another one is keeping who you got.
Yeah.
People that have ability, people that perform well, they have options. And right now it is a, job seekers market.
It is.
If you've got top talent working for you, people are going to be hunting for them and they have the option to leave. And I love this quote from Henry Ford. The only thing worse than training your employees and having them having them leave is not training them and having them stay. Because what happens? You train them, who stays? The people with the least ability.
Yeah.
I watched that happen. I watched that take companies down. It had a company that I worked with is a struggling technology firm. And they had gone from 1,100 to 300 in their company size because they owned the technology at one time at the market. It's a typical business cycle where they were in a new market environment and they were struggling to adapt to it. But in terms of what happened internally, they had this huge brain drain. People were watching what's going on, and then they were using headcount reductions as a way of cutting cost because they were hemorrhaging red ink all over the place. And some of their best people, not all, but there were some of their best people, like the ones that had less than 10 years with the company, they weren't that invested in their retirement. There were a few that were really good that were leaving no matter what because they were just that close to retirement and they needed the company to succeed and totally understand it and appreciate that kind of loyalty to the company. But they'd had a different experience with that company. The newer people, they're looking around and going, this isn't looking good. I at this point in my career can't risk finding out how this turns out. And they jump ship, which just accelerated the problems for the company. So you need to look at how do you develop people? What are your key positions? Who are your key people? And you got to make sure that you challenge them, develop them, give them things that help them, make sure that they're clear. You want them to stick around. You're glad they're part of the team. Give them opportunities to develop their abilities and a path forward to, promotion and whatnot. Cause you need a well-oiled team. You look at auto racing, most auto races are won or lost in the pits. It's and looking at what happened over the last 50 years in auto racing, they've gone from a couple, 2-3 minutes for a pit stop to less than 60 seconds. Change all 4 tires, gas up the car, adjust the suspension, clean the windows, and boom, they're off in less than 60 seconds. It's pretty amazing. How are you doing that in terms of continuous improvement within your company? But how are you also developing that kind of team where they work with each other? They're synchronized. They've practiced, right? Because you look at this photo, you've got the pit crew that's out in the middle. See if I can get the laser pointer going here. So you've got the pit crew that's out here where the action's happening, but we were talking about being detached and playing chess. Look, you got the team managers back here. You got people watching from up above. There's spotters. So there's the leadership is still detached and seeing the whole picture to make sure things run smoothly. And then they do an out brief afterwards and go, okay, on that pit stop, what worked well? What didn't? How can we do better? And they drill it. Now I'm stuck with my laser pointer. Bear with me just a second here. There we go. That's embarrassing. So developing teams is huge. And again, this comes back to you as the leader of your business. It's a different skill set. It's something new that you need to learn It's something that as your company grows, you need to continue to hone because your role changes. And, this is an example right here. You can practice stuff all day long and it still doesn't necessarily come off the way you thought it would. There we go. So let's talk about inflation as another force. Inflation is just burning money as it sits still. Right now, we are at 8.5 to 18% inflation, depending on whose numbers you look at. And that's from Bureau of Labor Statistics and Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve says we peaked at 19% inflation in February. The problem that creates is having a handle on cash flow and making sure that you're securing cash. Cash becomes way more important in inflation, getting cash up front. We were talking about price increases down the road as part of a long-term project because the costs have increased, but at the same time, there's the challenge of, let's see, I finally got my pen turned off. There's the challenge of accounts receivable. What are the things you need to be paying attention to? You need to be deep in your financials. You don't need to become a financial analysis expert yourself, but you need to be asking a lot of hard questions of the person on your team that does that, of your accountant that handles your money. Here, cash coming in is so huge. Here's a problem that creates. Here we're with our frustrated guy again. I had a client that was doing good on their average days aging for their accounts receivable. When we dug into the numbers, we found out 25% of their revenue was coming in at 60 days or later. In the current inflation environment, that's the equivalent of carrying 2 people on the payroll that are doing absolutely nothing. When you look at what that was costing them annually because of inflation. So we were able to move that in. At the same time, a few customers, for strategic reasons, because they were big customers, long-term customers, were allowed to continue that. But now it's a formal policy decision. It's not something that was just happening. So you got to watch the numbers, dive deep into them, and beware of variation in the numbers, because inflation, as time goes on, it just keeps reducing your money coming in. Now, watching the time, and we're about out of time. Pricing policy, we talked about. Value pricing a little bit. We talked about that. Value pricing is the concept of don't just increase a price. I was at the grocery store. I grabbed a bag of coffee beans, and here I got my coffee or dye mug right in front of me. Coffee is very important to me, and it was on sale. And I was going, "Hey, this is great!" And I looked at it, and the price was a discount off of a recent increase of a much greater amount. So the price had gone up. It had been discounted to the original price, and the amount in the bag was less. That's not value pricing, right?
So explain, I like this topic. Can you it's okay if we go over by, a few minutes,
okay.
But the value pricing, I think, is important for them, because we're talking about these issues with customers, especially because if you have to have the difficult conversations with these supply chain issues and things like that, the value pricing is important. So yes. Can you talk a little bit about that, Jeff? I know, we can go for another 10 minutes at least.
Okay. We'll make use of that.
Yeah.
So with the value pricing, it's about what is the value in your customer's life?
Yeah.
Right. How do they put value on it? And when you are talking pricing with them, when you are setting your pricing policy, key it to value, not what stuff costs you.
Yeah.
You'll find larger margins. People buy because they want convenience. They want, they're buying time. They're getting somebody else to do it for them. They're buying status. There's a fun story about, I think it's Zig Ziglar, who's, if you're not familiar with Zig Ziglar, as you're watching this, was a famous sales trainer and motivational speaker. And a kid comes up and asks him if he wants to mow, if he would let him mow his lawn. And he goes, "Well, how much you charging?" He goes, "Well, I'm mowing. You tell me what what you think would be appropriate." So he goes, thinks for a second. He goes, "How much you charging that guy across the street from me?" He tells him. He goes, "How much you charging that guy over there on the corner?" He tells him. He goes, "Okay, I tell you what, I'll pay you 25% more than they're paying you if my lawn always looks better than theirs. And I mean so much better that someone looks at my lawn and goes, wow," and looks at their lawn and goes, "Huh, that's not as good." And the kid did it. but he paid more money because so part of that was having it look nice, there's satisfaction in
Yeah.
that, but there's this with the client base that's paying for pools, that's an affluent market.
Yeah.
So they are competing with each other. They're competing with the images in their head of self-worth. They are looking for convenience and lifestyle. I talked to one of the big aerospace companies recently, and one of their local campuses, they're converting like 40% of their parking lot to mixed use retail because those employees are never, ever going to work on site again. They're going to be permanently remote. Do a certain percentage ahead of expected time to prepare for expected inflation. Excellent question, Nathan. And I want to compliment you because that's the kind of questions to be asking. The short answer is yes. Look at what's coming. Can you build margin in so that you can weather the storm? And so that you want to be prepared so that you don't have to go back and ask for more to the greatest extent possible, right? There's always exceptions. Now, part of how to do that, how to be able to ask, to have that bigger ask, is you're providing more value in the client's eyes.
Yes.
Right? You're the more prestigious firm to work with. You are, you're making you're easy to do business with. The planing mill, I worked with a wood mill, right? Really high tech. I've helped design launch systems. Some of my colleagues work for SpaceX now, but working with a wood mill is a great experience. I loved the team, loved working with the owner. They were one of the 6 most expensive in their industry, and 4 of their competitors failed. They survived because they were easy to do business with. 1, they had great relationships with their customers, and 2, they had an unheard of returns policy in their industry. And because of those things, they were, and now they've made a super high quality product, right? So the product itself was superb, yet while other companies had made high quality products, they stumbled. And one of the things that we constantly heard from their customers was because of the relationship and because they were so easy to do business with. They made it convenient. They weren't burning up. When's the last time, as you're watching this, when's the last time that you spent 2 hours talking to customer service that wasn't on cable company, phone service, something, those have both been made fun of by stand-up comics for decades because it tends to be a challenging experience in getting a response. I was changing a phone service. Their minimum wait time for customer service was 21 hours. They expected you to be on the phone or online. So they had a chat. They'll go, go online. You had to either be on the phone or connected online for a minimum of 21 hours to get to the front of their queue. It's like,
yeah,
really? So the how to build in that protection, the how to get that percentage price increase comes in the value pricing. You're working in an affluent market. If you focus on value, what the customer values, and having those kinds of conversations, you may find that you are very, very inflation and recession, which is another concern we've got on the horizon, resistant, because your margins will be tied to your pricing will be tied to what they perceive as value, not a percentage above what it's costing you to do the job.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous place to be. That's commodity pricing, which means if someone else comes in and undercuts you, where do you go? And do you really want customers? Sometimes we got to take the business to keep the doors open. I understand that. But as a policy, do you want to have customers that are going to bail on you as soon as somebody else comes around for 15% less? How good of a customer is that going to be? And quite frankly, put a comment in on this. This is another participation point. Have you had clients like that? They just negotiate on every little single thing when you're getting the contract set up, and then you start to roll it out, and guess what? They are what we call a PITA client, because you spend 80% of your problem solving time with that client.
Yeah.
Because they've got a problem with they continue that behavior throughout. And it's PITA, it's what we call a pain in the, what.
Yeah.
So
if you're seeing that at the beginning, obviously you may want to, you set yourself up for the fact that they're going to be a problem the whole time. So
yes. And and sometimes we take, I've taken on clients like that and later gone, I really should have known better. But sometimes you do it out of need.
Yeah.
And sometimes it seems like it's going to be okay and they turn into a PITA client. And this is about, you do the right things, and the bulk of your business is, if you can keep those types of situations, if your PITA clients are 10% or less, you really want them below 5% because they just take up so much of your emotional bandwidth to deal with. Or coming back to the wood mill that I was talking about, we started referring all of their PITA clients out to competitors. Because the owner one day went, I just don't like dealing with these people. He's going, great, refer them to a competitor. Well, we'll lose the business. Like, so do you really need the business? No. Is one of your competitors there? And it turned out when he thought it through, they had a competitor that was good at dealing with those personalities. So guess what? Everybody won. Sent them over there. Client was happier. Competitors happier. They've now got emotional and physical capacity to serve customers that they like working with. And they did. They filled that space up really fast. So cash out. High inflation, cash out is a problem. Here's why. In an high inflation environment, interest rates go crazy. We've already seen the prime rate go up. Mortgage rates have doubled from 3% to 6%, the best mortgage rates on the market that are available. And it's going to go higher. Larry Summers, who is the former Treasury Secretary for the USA, had made the statement that interest rates need to go higher than inflation in order to get inflation under control. So think about that. Inflation's already at 8 something percent. It depends on whose numbers you look at. Now there was a Federal Reserve interim report that it looks like April is going to be like 9.5%. So it's going up higher. So what happens if the prime rate jumps up to 12, 15%? Your credit card rate, how many things are linked to the prime rate? How many variable rate loans are linked to the prime rate? Mortgages, credit cards, business loans, auto loans. Where is that going to bite you? Where is that going to take a chunk out of your cash flow and require much, much more cash out? Start looking at, now I'm not a financial advisor, so this is not meant to be financial advice. Here is my advice to you. Ask that question of the financial professionals that you're working with, because interest rates are going up. And this is what happened in November 1980. I remember this because I was in high school. I'm dating myself again, but imagine this, a prime rate of 21.5%. People were buying homes with mortgages that had 20% interest rates. How crazy is that? Am I predicting that that's what's going to happen? No. What I am saying is, as a leader, to be prepared, this is something you need to look at. You need to ask that question. Like Terrence was asking a great question earlier. You need to ask those kinds of powerful questions. And this is part of your personal leadership development journey, asking those kinds of questions of the professionals that you have put on your team and the professionals outside your company that you hire, so that your business doesn't get hurt by this. So you personally don't get hurt by this. Then during these inflation spikes, it turned out there was something in the loan covenants on my dad's mortgage on our home that was somehow tied into this. He'd been forced to retire on a disability late, just a few years shy of retirement. And the bank called the mortgage on the house. He was livid. He's like, oh, it was a fixed rate mortgage. And they're calling the loan and wanting, they say, well, we're going to increase it. If you want to renegotiate, we'll raise the interest rates. And he went down and paid the loan off. So, they were just in the last few years of the loan, but this is something else to look at. Yes, what are the covenants in your loan agreements? What interest rates and inflation can affect the financial ratios in your company's balance sheet and income statements? Those, you need to know what those are and be on top of them, because that can trigger getting your loans called. I had a manufacturing client that had taken on, they bought some equipment that they wanted on a song and a prayer because a competitor had gone out of business. And they also brought over the liabilities for that competitor as well. So they took on some of that company's debts. That changed their financial ratios. Their bank that had the owner and CEO's mortgage on his home held the revolving line of credit that they used to fund operations month to month, and had the long-term loans on their business assets and property. called him up and said, you've got 30 days to find another bank. We're calling all your loans, pay, or we're going to come in and seize all your assets.
Oh my gosh.
And no one else would touch him because of what he did to his financial ratios. And we were able to connect him with a group that was a legitimate group, not like, somebody that would be considered a loan shark, but with a group that dealt with hard situations like that. And it was incredibly expensive to refinance everything. So watch out.
We're at the top of the hour there, Jeff. Our strategic fixed rate. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll just do this real quick and then we'll jump toward. We'll jump ahead. So I just want to touch on this. Interest rates are still historically low. Talk to your financial professionals that you work with about strategic use of fixed rate debt, or in other words, long-term fixed loans, because this is a great time to look at what equipment do you need to buy. Do you need a new truck or a new couple of trucks for field work that you're going to buy? You're thinking, well, we're going to buy that in 2 years. If inflation's at 12% a year, what's that truck going to cost you in 2 years? If you can get a 6% loan today, while interest rates are headed to 10 next year, to pay off, to buy that truck. Use that to get some cash reserve, do some upgrades, or just make sure you've got some rainy day money set aside. How long can your company run? If you had zero income, zero revenue, how long can you keep the doors open on your company?
Right.
It needs to be 6 to 12 months at least. It needs to be at
It's
least
also
6
a good
to 12
time
months.
to apply for some zero interest credit cards that are good for a year. If you have good credit and you want to build business credit, it's a perfect time to transfer balances over to zero interest credit cards or get a new credit card at zero interest. Mine are just all come out. I have a couple of new ones that I got last year. And of course, right now is when it's expiring. Right. It's like perfect. Good timing, Michelle. But it is what it is.
Yes. But still, it's when it's not clear, we know interest rates are going up. We know inflation is going to stay 3 to 5 years. We just don't know how much of that we're going to get hit with. So it's very prudent to do that. If you using credit cards in business is a standard practice. Yeah. How much do you carry on those credit cards? Move that to zero interest. Even if it's only for a year, you've got time to see where things are headed and make other arrangements. It's not a panic move. So this is about playing chess, stepping back. It's so important to be detached because those who panic get eaten first. Right. We talked about upgrades, increasing productivity. That's a great cost reduction and that ties into the work that you do in supply chain analysis will show productivity improvements. Automate, marketing is a great place to be able to automate email, things like that. Perspective. This is what I wanted to end with. Perspective. How well you know your customers and their lifestyle and can live in their shoes and be detached from the emotions of day-to-day working in your business will open up more opportunities and position you to be one of the winners through all this chaos that we're experiencing now and that will continue for the next couple of years. It'll open up opportunities to be able to say, hey, how can you partner with a related service? If you're designing high-end pools, how much of that outside space are you serving? What about landscape? What about interior design? Pulling that exterior living and that external living environment inside the house, like they do with is it pronounced lanais in Hawaii, where you kind of have the whole wall opens up to the patio and it brings the outside inside to one of the rooms. Doing those kinds of things, lawn services, maintenance services. If you're designing and building pools, or you're also doing the service side, or can you partner with somebody that does? Are there other areas as supply chain disruptions continue? Are some of those areas possible for you to either partner with or acquire? I saw a great industry magazine article on a successful merger of two long-term companies in, I think it was North Carolina. Small business doesn't really think about mergers and acquisitions. That's always a big corporate thing. That's a viable strategy. And especially right now, because there's a whole generation of people that are retiring out of their businesses just as the time comes up for the need to expand your business in other areas. So that's an avenue to consider. Definitely have legal and financial professionals involved in those conversations, but it's something to look at. how can you help? Maybe it's just joint venturing on marketing so you can help each other out. But if you've got, coming back to the supply chain disruptions, are there other areas that you can serve your clients that are related that now you understand because of their life, because of how well you understand them and their lifestyle, that aren't caught up in supply chain disruptions? So you've got revenue coming in from there. I believe it was Toyota sent a bunch of engineers out back in the day to live with families that were buying minivans in the early days of the minivan craze. They lived with them, saw how they used the minivans, what the lifestyle was. I mean, literally went and lived in their homes for like 30 days to 6 months. Then they went back and added features and design changes to the minivans that the customers had never even thought about. Is one of those things. Have you ever experienced that? You buy a product, it has a feature, you go, oh, that's kind of neat. Something you never would have thought of in a million years. Like keyless entry to a car. For one thing, we all carry, a lot of us carry the key fobs. I went from never having had a key fob to just walking up and opening the door. It was a massive mind shift. And I was going, there's something that I really can't live without now that I never thought of until I experienced it. Right. Have you experienced that in anything that you've bought? If you understand your customer well enough, you can give them that experience and they'll pay. You're serving pools are in the affluent and ultra affluent market that goes all the way. I had dinner with a interior designer that only works on houses of 25,000 square feet and up. He said, well, we don't refer to them as luxury homes. We call them personal resorts.
Yeah.
Boom. For me, I thought completely differently about the market he was serving when he phrased it that way. It's a personal resort. So in those markets, if you understand them and provide value and fit into their lifestyle, especially if it's something that makes them go, I hadn't thought of that, they will pay dearly for that because you're bringing them a lot of value in their life. But you got to play chess to get there. Which is, Michelle, thank you for letting me run over as you've been participating in this. Thank you for that. And Michelle,
we could have done 2 hours with you, Jeff, easily. No problem there. We want to again thank our corporate engagement team at Watershape University. These partners are really important to us because they allow us to provide free education and do other things to support education in this industry. So we're so excited about it. Thank you guys for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here. Nathan, thank you. We appreciate it. Again, we're going to actually put this particular podcast episode or this webinar episode on the ATM, the Ask the Masters YouTube channel. So I'll be putting links out on the Watershape University Facebook and Instagram and other places that you guys can go and watch it or share it with somebody that you'd like to share it with. Now, did you have a handout that you wanted to provide? Did you want them to go to your website, Jeff?
I do. If they just go to jeffreyawolfe.com, it'll pop up right on the right-hand side of the screen. There's a big button for them that says, welcome Watershape University participants. And they click that in
jeffreyawolfe.com, and you can go there and you'll get access to the handout for this particular webinar. Again, thanks for joining us. We know you're busy, so we hope that you were able to take a tip or two. I know that I was. Take a tip or two from this particular webinar and that you can use that in your business and implement it quickly to help us all move forward during these kind of chaotic times. Again, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity to be of service.
Thank you.